The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Buckingham Palace as hundreds of tourists gathered outside the famous gates. Children pressed their faces against the iron bars while parents snapped endless photos. Tour guides spoke in multiple languages, explaining the history of the royal residence to eager visitors from around the world. The air buzzed with excitement and anticipation as people hoped to catch a glimpse of royalty or witness the famous changing of the guard ceremony. Standing perfectly still at his post was Royal Guard James Mitchell, his bright red uniform immaculate, despite the early morning drizzle that had dampened the London streets. His tall black hat sat precisely on his head, and his polished boots reflected the weak sunlight that filtered through the gray clouds above. At 28 years old, Mitchell had served as a royal guard for 3 years, and he had grown accustomed to the constant attention from tourists, who treated him more like a living statue than a highly trained soldier. Mitchell's rifle remained perfectly positioned against his shoulder as he stared straight ahead with unwavering focus. His face showed no emotion, no acknowledgement of the countless cameras pointed in his direction. This was exactly how he had been trained to behave. Royal guards were expected to remain completely motionless and silent, no matter what happened around them. They were the living symbols of British tradition and discipline, representing centuries of military excellence and unwavering loyalty to the crown. Behind his stoic expression, Mitchell remained constantly alert. His training had taught him to observe everything while appearing to notice nothing. He could see the crowd in his peripheral vision, noting the movements of each person near his post. Most tourists followed a predictable pattern. They would approach, take photos, maybe try to make him laugh or move, then continue on their way. But Mitchell had learned to identify unusual behavior, and something about one particular man in the crowd had caught his attention. The man appeared to be in his early 30s, with unkempt brown hair and clothes that looked like they had not been washed in days. His name was Marcus Thompson, though Mitchell did not know this yet. Thompson had been standing near the gate for almost an hour, much longer than typical tourists. While other visitors moved around, chatted excitedly, and took photos, Thompson remained still, watching the guard with an intensity that made Mitchell slightly uncomfortable. Thompson's eyes held an unsettling gleam as he studied every detail of Mitchell's position and routine. He had been planning this moment for weeks, consumed by delusions that the royal family was somehow responsible for all of his personal problems. Mental illness had twisted his thinking, making him believe that attacking a royal guard would send a powerful message and somehow solve his troubles. In his mind, the guard represented everything wrong with society: privilege, tradition, and a system that had failed him. As Thompson stood among the tourists, his right hand fidgeted nervously in his jacket pocket, wrapping around the handle of a large screwdriver he had brought with him. He had chosen this weapon carefully, believing it would be deadly effective while being easy to conceal. The metal tool felt cold and heavy in his grip as he worked up the courage to carry out his violent plan. Other visitors continued their normal routines, completely unaware of the danger standing just feet away from them. Parents lifted children onto their shoulders for better views, teenagers posed for selfies, and elderly couples shared memories of previous visits to the palace. The atmosphere remained cheerful and relaxed, with no one suspecting that tragedy was just moments away. Mitchell continued his duty, maintaining his perfect posture and steady gaze. He had no idea that the man who had been watching him so intently was preparing to launch a vicious attack. The guard's military training had prepared him for many situations, but he never expected to face a life-threatening assault while simply standing at his post during what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning. The peaceful scene was about to transform into chaos, and neither the guard nor the innocent bystanders had any idea what was coming next. Thompson walked slowly around the perimeter of the palace grounds, his eyes never leaving the royal guard for more than a few seconds. He pretended to be interested in the architecture and historical plaques, but his real focus remained on studying every detail of the guard's position and routine. Each time he completed a circle, he noted the timing, the angles, and the best possible approach for his planned attack. The screwdriver felt heavier in his pocket with each passing minute, Thompson had practiced the motion countless times in his small apartment, thrusting the tool forward into pillows and imagining the moment when he would finally strike back at what he believed was an unjust system. His mind was clouded with anger and resentment that had been building for months since losing his job at a construction company. During his second lap around the area, Thompson noticed the positioning of security cameras and the patrol patterns of other guards. He had done his homework well, spending weeks observing the palace from different vantage points and studying online maps of the area. In his twisted mind, he had convinced himself that this attack would make him famous and send a powerful message to the world about his grievances against society. A group of school children on a field trip passed by Thompson, their excited chatter and laughter a stark contrast to the dark thoughts consuming his mind. Their teacher pointed toward the guard and explained the tradition of the royal guards to the young students. Thompson felt a flash of irritation at their innocent joy, viewing it as another example of how others seemed to enjoy life while he suffered. As the morning progressed, more tourists arrived at the palace. Thompson found himself surrounded by families, couples, and tour groups, all eager to experience the royal atmosphere. He used their presence as cover, blending into the crowd while maintaining his surveillance of the guard. The constant movement of people around him made it easier to remain unnoticed by security personnel who were trained to spot suspicious behavior. Thompson's breathing became more rapid as he rehearsed his plan one final time. He would approach from the left side where there seemed to be slightly less foot traffic. The guard appeared to be focused straight ahead, which would give Thompson the element of surprise he needed. He estimated it would take him 3 quick steps to reach the guard once he made his move. Meanwhile, Guard Mitchell remained in his position, though he had begun to feel increasingly uncomfortable about the man who kept circling the area. His training had taught him to trust his instincts, and something about this particular visitor felt different from the usual curious tourists. Mitchell could sense the man's intense stare even when he was not directly in view. Other royal guards had also begun to take notice of Thompson's behavior. Through subtle hand signals and brief radio communications, they shared their observations about the suspicious individual who had been lingering in the area for an unusually long time. However, they had to balance their vigilance with the need to maintain their ceremonial duties and not alarm the innocent visitors. Thompson checked his watch repeatedly, growing more agitated with each passing moment. His original plan had been to strike during the busiest part of the morning when the crowd would provide maximum chaos and confusion. He was waiting for the perfect moment when enough people would be present to witness his attack, but not so many that he would be immediately overwhelmed by bystanders. The man's inner turmoil was becoming more visible to those paying close attention. His hands shook slightly as he fidgeted with objects in his pockets, and sweat had begun to form on his forehead. Despite the cool London weather, Thompson muttered under his breath, having imaginary conversations with the royal family and rehearsing the angry words he planned to shout during his attack. He was building up his rage, using it as fuel for the violent act he was about to commit. The moment had finally arrived. Thompson's heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears as he positioned himself for the attack. His sweaty palm gripped the screwdriver handle tightly, while his other hand steadied himself against the metal fence. The crowd around him continued their normal activities, completely unaware that violence was about to explode in their peaceful morning. Thompson took 3 deep breaths, trying to calm his nerves while building up his courage. His mind raced with angry thoughts about how unfair life had been to him. He convinced himself that this single act would somehow balance the scales of justice and make people pay attention to his suffering. The screwdriver felt like a weapon of righteous anger in his trembling hand. Without any warning or sound, Thompson suddenly broke from the crowd and charged directly toward Guard Mitchell. His movements were swift and determined as he covered the distance in just a few powerful strides. The screwdriver emerged from his jacket pocket, its sharp metal point aimed directly at the center of the guard's chest, where it could cause maximum damage. The attack happened so quickly that nearby tourists barely had time to process what they were seeing. One moment they were peacefully taking photos and chatting, and the next moment a man was running toward the guard with a weapon raised high above his head. Time seemed to slow down as Thompson closed the final few feet between himself and his target. Thompson's face was twisted with rage and determination as he let out a wild, angry scream. The sound cut through the morning air like a knife, causing everyone within earshot to turn and stare in shock and horror. His voice carried all the frustration and hatred he had been building up for months, transforming into a terrifying battle cry. The sharp metal tip of the screwdriver caught the sunlight as it moved through the air toward Mitchell's uniform. Thompson put every ounce of his strength behind the thrust, aiming for what he believed would be a fatal blow. His entire body weight was committed to the attack as he lunged forward with deadly intent. Tourists around the scene began to react in different ways. Some stood frozen in shock, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Others immediately began screaming and backing away from the violence that was unfolding before their eyes. A few people fumbled for their phones, trying to capture the incident on video while their hands shook with fear and adrenaline. Children in the crowd started crying as the adults around them panicked and tried to shield them from the terrifying scene. Parents grabbed their kids and pulled them behind barriers or other people, desperate to protect them from whatever was happening. The peaceful family atmosphere of the morning was shattered in an instant. Guard Mitchell, who had been standing perfectly still just moments before, suddenly found himself face to face with a deadly weapon aimed at his heart. The attack came from his left side, exactly where Thompson had planned to strike. For a split second, it seemed like the ceremonial guard would be caught completely off guard by the sudden assault. The screwdriver came within inches of Mitchell's red uniform as Thompson completed his charge. Everything that happened next would depend on the guard's training and reflexes. Years of military preparation were about to be put to the ultimate test in a life-or-death situation that lasted only seconds but would be remembered forever. The crowd held its breath as they watched the drama unfold, not knowing whether they were about to witness a tragedy or a remarkable display of defensive skill. The peaceful morning at Buckingham Palace had transformed into a scene of chaos and danger that no one would ever forget. In that crucial moment when the screwdriver was just inches from his chest, Guard Mitchell's extensive training took complete control of his body. His reflexes kicked in faster than conscious thought as years of military drills and combat preparation activated automatically. What looked like certain disaster was about to become a masterful display of defensive skill. Mitchell moved with lightning speed and precision that seemed almost impossible for someone who had been standing perfectly still just seconds before. Instead of stepping backward or trying to block the attack, he twisted his entire body to the right while simultaneously reaching out with his left hand. His movement was so fluid and quick that it appeared to be one single motion rather than separate actions. The guard's training had taught him exactly how to deal with knife attacks and similar weapon threats. Rather than panic or freeze, his muscle memory guided him through the defensive technique he had practiced thousands of times in training. His instructors had drilled these movements into him until they became as natural as breathing. Mitchell's hand shot out and grabbed Thompson's wrist with incredible strength and accuracy. The guard's grip was like iron as he caught the attacker's arm just as the screwdriver reached its closest point to his uniform. The weapon stopped moving forward instantly, held in place by Mitchell's powerful grasp. Using Thompson's own forward momentum against him, Mitchell twisted the attacker's arm in a way that caused immediate pain and forced him to lose control of the weapon. The technique was designed to use an opponent's energy and strength to defeat them, rather than relying purely on the defender's own power. It was a perfect example of how proper training could overcome even the most violent attacks. The screwdriver fell from Thompson's hand and clattered loudly on the stone ground below. The sound of metal hitting the pavements seemed to echo through the suddenly quiet courtyard as everyone watched in amazement. What had seemed like a certain tragedy just moments before had been prevented by the guard's incredible skill. Thompson's face showed complete shock and confusion as he realized his attack had failed so completely. His eyes went wide as he felt the guard's powerful grip controlling his arm and preventing any further movement. The pain in his wrist was immediate and intense, making him cry out in surprise and discomfort. Mitchell maintained his hold on Thompson's arm while keeping his own body positioned to prevent any additional attacks. His other hand remained free and ready to defend against any other weapons or threats. The guard's face remained calm and focused, showing no signs of fear or excitement despite what had just happened. The tourists who had been watching in horror suddenly burst into cheers and applause as they realized the guard had successfully defended himself. Many people had been holding their breath during the attack, and now they released their tension through loud expressions of relief and admiration. Some visitors shouted words of praise while others simply clapped their hands in appreciation. Children who had been crying just moments before now stared in wonder at the guard who had moved so quickly and skillfully. Parents explained to their kids that the guard was specially trained to protect himself and others from dangerous people. The scene had transformed from terrifying to inspiring in just a few seconds. Mitchell's defensive move had not only saved his own life, but also protected the innocent bystanders who could have been hurt if Thompson had gotten past him with the weapon. The guard had proven that his ceremonial duties did not make him vulnerable or helpless when real danger appeared. Thompson struggled weakly against the guard's grip, but it was clear that he was completely overpowered and under control. His violent plan had been stopped cold by someone who was far better trained and prepared than he had ever imagined possible. Within seconds of Mitchell subduing Thompson, the sound of running boots filled the air as backup guards rushed to the scene from every direction. The palace security system had been activated the moment the attack began, and now heavily armed officers were converging on the location with military precision and speed. 3 additional royal guards appeared first, their red uniforms bright against the gray morning sky, as they sprinted across the courtyard. Behind them came armed police officers in black tactical gear, their weapons drawn and ready for any additional threats. The response was overwhelming and immediate, showing just how seriously any attack on royal property was taken. Mitchell continued to hold Thompson firmly while calmly speaking into his radio to coordinate with the approaching backup. His voice remained steady and professional as he provided details about the situation to his commanders. Even though he had just faced a life-threatening attack, the guard showed no signs of panic or excitement. The first backup guard to arrive was Sergeant Williams, a veteran with 15 years of experience protecting the royal family. He quickly assessed the situation and began directing the other officers into position around the incident. Within moments, a secure perimeter had been established to ensure no other threats could approach the area. Thompson found himself surrounded by at least 8 highly trained security personnel, all focused on ensuring he could not cause any further harm. The overwhelming response made it clear that his attack had triggered the full force of the royal protection system. His plan to create chaos had instead resulted in his complete containment. Armed police officers took positions at strategic points around the courtyard, while other guards began moving tourists away from the immediate area. The crowd was guided to safety zones where they could be protected while still allowing the security forces to do their work effectively. Parents held their children close as they were escorted to secure locations. Additional security teams arrived in unmarked vehicles that seemed to appear from nowhere. These officers were part of specialized units trained specifically to handle threats against the royal family and their properties. Their presence demonstrated the multiple layers of protection that surrounded Buckingham Palace at all times. Thompson's eyes darted around wildly as he realized the full scale of the response his attack had triggered. What he had thought would be a simple assault on a single guard had instead activated an entire network of highly trained professionals. The reality of his situation was beginning to sink in as he saw the serious expressions on the faces surrounding him. Mitchell finally released his grip on Thompson's arm as other officers moved in to take physical control of the attacker. The transition was smooth and professional, with each person knowing exactly what their role was in the situation. Thompson was immediately restrained with heavy-duty handcuffs that left no possibility for escape. Medical personnel arrived on the scene to check both Mitchell and Thompson for injuries. The guard was examined quickly and found to be completely unharmed, while Thompson had some bruising on his wrist from where Mitchell had gripped him during the defensive move. The medical team also checked him for signs of drug use or other medical issues. Detective Inspector Sarah Chen took charge of the scene as the senior investigating officer. She began organizing the collection of evidence and the interviewing of witnesses while ensuring that the area remained secure. Her experience with similar incidents made her the perfect person to handle such a high-profile case. The screwdriver that Thompson had dropped was carefully photographed and bagged as evidence. Forensic specialists examined the weapon for fingerprints and other trace evidence that could be used in the prosecution of the case. Every detail was being documented to ensure a successful conviction. Detective Inspector Chen approached Thompson with the formal caution that would protect his rights during the arrest process. Her voice was clear and authoritative as she informed him that he was being arrested on suspicion of attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon. Thompson's face went pale as he heard the serious charges that would likely keep him in prison for many years. The handcuffs clicked into place with a final sound that seemed to seal Thompson's fate. He was searched thoroughly for any additional weapons or dangerous items that he might have been carrying. To everyone's alarm, the search revealed that Thompson had brought not just one screwdriver, but 3 different sizes, along with a small knife hidden in his boot. The discovery of multiple weapons made it clear that Thompson had planned his attack carefully and had been prepared to cause serious harm to multiple people. This evidence would later prove crucial in showing that the attack was premeditated rather than a moment of sudden anger. The prosecutor would use these weapons to argue for the maximum possible sentence. Thompson remained mostly silent during the arrest process, though he muttered occasionally under his breath about injustices and conspiracies. His mental state was clearly unstable, and the arresting officers made notes about his behavior that would be important for psychological evaluations later. They treated him with professional courtesy while maintaining strict security. As Thompson was led away to a waiting police van, curious tourists pressed against the barriers that had been set up to keep them at a safe distance. Many had witnessed the entire incident and were eager to share their stories with friends and family. Some had managed to capture parts of the attack and arrest on their phones and cameras. The police van drove away with Thompson secured inside, escorted by additional vehicles filled with armed officers. The convoy moved quickly through London traffic as they headed toward a high-security police station, where Thompson would be processed and held pending his court appearance. The sight of the heavily guarded vehicles reminded everyone of how seriously the authorities treated attacks on royal property. Back at the scene, investigators continued their work collecting evidence and interviewing witnesses. Each tourist who had seen the attack was asked to provide a statement about what they had observed. Many were still shaking from the experience, but were eager to help ensure that justice would be served in the case. Crime scene technicians carefully measured and photographed every detail of the location where the attack had occurred. They collected samples from the ground where the screwdriver had fallen and took detailed pictures of Thompson's footprints and the path he had taken during his charge toward the guard. No detail was too small to be overlooked in their investigation. The investigation revealed that Thompson had been unemployed for several months after losing his job at a construction company. His former coworkers described him as increasingly angry and unstable in the weeks before he was fired for poor performance and conflicts with supervisors. His financial problems had grown worse as he struggled to find new employment. Mental health records showed that Thompson had a history of depression and anxiety that had worsened significantly in recent months. He had stopped taking his prescribed medications and had begun to develop paranoid thoughts about the government and society in general. These factors would later play a role in his trial and sentencing. Thompson's small apartment was searched by police who found evidence of his planning for the attack. They discovered maps of Buckingham Palace, printed schedules of guard rotations, and a notebook filled with angry writings about the royal family. His internet search history showed that he had researched palace security and looked up information about previous attacks on royal properties. The evidence painted a picture of a man whose mental illness had combined with personal failures to create a dangerous obsession with attacking representatives of authority and tradition. His case would later be studied by experts trying to understand how to identify and help people before they resort to violence. After giving his statement to Detective Inspector Chen and other investigating officers, Guard Mitchell made a decision that amazed everyone present. Instead of taking the rest of the day off to recover from the traumatic incident, he requested permission to return to his post and complete his assigned duty shift. His dedication to service impressed both his fellow guards and the senior officers overseeing the investigation. The medical team had already cleared Mitchell for duty after a thorough examination revealed no physical injuries from the encounter. His quick reflexes and proper defensive techniques had protected him completely from harm during Thompson's attack. However, the psychological impact of facing a deadly weapon was something that would need to be monitored in the coming days and weeks. Captain Roberts, the commanding officer for the Royal Guard unit, personally spoke with Mitchell about his decision to continue working. He wanted to ensure that the young guard was not simply trying to appear tough or avoid dealing with the emotional aftermath of the attack. After a long conversation, Roberts was convinced that Mitchell genuinely felt ready to return to his duties. Mitchell walked back to his post with his rifle in the proper position and his uniform straightened after the brief disruption. As he resumed his stance, a small crowd of tourists who had witnessed the earlier events began to gather around him again. Word of his heroic defense had spread quickly among the visitors, and many wanted to see the guard who had single-handedly stopped an armed attacker. The tourists who approached Mitchell were much different from the usual visitors who simply wanted to take photos or try to make him laugh. These people genuinely wanted to express their gratitude and admiration for his bravery and skill. Some offered quiet words of thanks, while others simply nodded respectfully as they passed by his position. Children who had been frightened by the violence earlier in the day now looked at Mitchell with wonder and respect. Their parents explained that he was a special soldier whose job was to protect important people and places. Many kids asked their parents if they could grow up to be brave guards like him, showing how his actions had transformed fear into inspiration. Fellow guards who had responded to the emergency made sure to check on Mitchell throughout the remainder of his shift. They offered to take over his post if he needed any breaks or felt overwhelmed by the attention he was receiving. The brotherhood among the Royal Guards was strong, and they all supported each other through difficult situations. Senior palace officials visited Mitchell during his shift to personally thank him for his outstanding service. His actions had prevented what could have been a major security incident and possibly saved lives. The officials assured him that his heroism would be formally recognized through proper channels in the Royal Guard system. News reporters had begun gathering outside the palace gates as word of the attack spread through London media outlets. They were eager to interview Mitchell about his experience, but palace protocol prevented guards from speaking to the press while on duty. His story would have to wait until official statements could be prepared by palace communications staff. Mitchell's calm return to duty sent a powerful message to anyone who might be watching that attacks on royal guards would not disrupt their important work. His professional demeanor showed that the Royal Guard system was strong enough to handle any threats that might arise. The ceremonial aspects of his role were backed by real military training and capability. As the day progressed, the area around Mitchell's post gradually returned to normal tourist activity. Families continued their visits to the palace, though many took extra time to observe and appreciate the dedicated guards who protected this historic location. The morning's events had given everyone a new perspective on the skill and bravery of these ceremonial soldiers. Mitchell completed his full shift without incident, standing at attention for the remaining hours despite everything that had happened. His dedication to duty became part of the story that tourists would tell when they returned home, spreading word of the exceptional guards who protected Buckingham Palace. 3 days after his arrest, Thompson appeared in Westminster Magistrates' Court for his initial hearing. The courtroom was packed with reporters, legal professionals, and members of the public who wanted to see justice served for the shocking attack on royal property. Thompson sat quietly in the dock, looking much smaller and more fragile than he had during his violent assault. The prosecutor, Sarah Hamilton QC, outlined the serious charges against Thompson to the packed courtroom. He was formally charged with attempted murder, possession of weapons with intent to cause harm, assault with a deadly weapon, and threatening behavior at a protected royal site. Each charge carried significant prison time, and together they could result in a sentence of 15 to 20 years. The evidence against Thompson was overwhelming and undeniable. Multiple security cameras had captured the entire attack from different angles, providing crystal clear footage of him charging at guard Mitchell with the screwdriver raised. Dozens of tourists had witnessed the incident and provided consistent statements about what they had seen. Thompson's court-appointed lawyer, David Walsh, attempted to argue that his client suffered from severe mental health issues that had affected his judgment at the time of the attack. Walsh presented medical records showing Thompson's history of depression, anxiety, and recent psychotic episodes that had gone untreated when he stopped taking his medications. However, the prosecution successfully argued that despite his mental health problems, Thompson had clearly planned the attack over several weeks. The evidence found in his apartment, including maps of the palace and detailed notes about guard schedules, proved that this was not a sudden impulse, but a carefully thought-out assault. The judge, Justice Margaret Thornton, was particularly stern in her comments about the case. She noted that attacks on royal guards were not just crimes against individuals, but attacks on the crown itself and everything it represented in British society. Such actions threatened the safety of both the guards and the innocent tourists who visited the palace each day. Justice Thornton rejected the defense's request for a reduced sentence based on mental health grounds. While she acknowledged that Thompson needed psychiatric treatment, she emphasized that his condition did not excuse the premeditated nature of his violent attack. The safety of the public and the deterrent effect of punishment were her primary concerns. Thompson was sentenced to 12 years in prison with the requirement that he receive ongoing mental health treatment throughout his incarceration. The judge specified that he would not be eligible for parole until he had served at least 8 years of his sentence and had been certified as no longer a danger to society. The sentencing sent a clear message that the British justice system would not tolerate attacks on royal guards or other symbols of the monarchy. Security experts noted that the swift prosecution and harsh sentence would likely deter others who might consider similar acts of violence against royal properties or personnel. Thompson's family, who had been largely absent during his descent into mental illness, issued a statement through their lawyer expressing relief that no one had been seriously injured in the attack. They apologized to Guard Mitchell and the royal family for their relative's actions and pledged to support his treatment while in prison. The case received extensive media coverage both in Britain and internationally, highlighting the exceptional training and dedication of royal guards. Many news outlets used the incident as an opportunity to educate the public about the serious military background and capabilities of these ceremonial soldiers. Guard Mitchell attended the sentencing hearing to see justice served for the attack he had faced. He remained as dignified and composed in the courtroom as he had been during the actual incident. Court officials noted his professional demeanor and obvious relief that the legal process had concluded successfully. Mental health advocates used Thompson's case to call for better support systems for people struggling with psychiatric issues and unemployment. They argued that earlier intervention might have prevented the attack and helped Thompson get the treatment he needed before his condition deteriorated to the point of violence. 6 months after the attack, Guard Mitchell was called to a special ceremony at Buckingham Palace where he would be formally recognized for his exceptional service and bravery. The event was attended by senior Royal Guard officers, palace officials, and even members of the royal family, who wanted to personally thank him for his heroic actions that day. Mitchell received the Royal Victoria Medal, a prestigious honor given to individuals who have shown extraordinary devotion to the crown. The medal was presented by a senior royal who praised his quick thinking, professional training, and dedication to duty under extreme circumstances. The recognition was both a personal honor and acknowledgement of the high standards maintained by all royal guards. The incident had already become a training example used in Royal Guard academies across the country. Video footage of Mitchell's defensive technique was studied by new recruits who learned how proper training and steady nerves could overcome even the most dangerous situations. His actions demonstrated perfectly the principles that all guards were taught to follow. Mitchell's response to the attack led to enhanced security protocols throughout all royal properties. Additional training programs were developed to help guards deal with similar situations, and communication systems were improved to ensure even faster response times for backup personnel. The lessons learned from that morning helped make all royal sites safer. The brave guard continued his career with the Royal Protection Unit, earning promotions and additional responsibilities over the following years. His colleagues respected him not just for his heroic moment, but for his continued dedication and humble attitude about the recognition he had received. Mitchell never allowed the fame from the incident to affect his professional demeanor. International security experts visited Britain to study the incident and learn from the Royal Guard training methods that had proven so effective. Mitchell's defensive techniques were incorporated into protection protocols for important officials and facilities in other countries. His actions had an impact far beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace. Thompson, meanwhile, was receiving intensive psychiatric treatment in prison that had begun to help him understand how his mental illness had contributed to his violent actions. The structured environment and regular medication had stabilized his condition significantly. He expressed deep remorse for what he had done and began writing letters of apology, though he was not allowed to send them directly to Mitchell. The attack had brought national attention to issues of mental health care and support systems for people struggling with unemployment and depression. New programs were developed to identify and help individuals before their problems escalated to dangerous levels. Thompson's case became a cautionary tale about the importance of seeking help during difficult times. Tourist interest in the Royal Guards increased dramatically after the incident became widely known. Visitors came specifically hoping to see Mitchell or other guards who might demonstrate the same level of skill and professionalism. The palace had to manage increased crowds while maintaining security and the dignified atmosphere appropriate for a royal residence. Educational programs for children now included information about the real training and capabilities of ceremonial guards. Many young people were inspired by Mitchell's story to consider careers in military service or security protection. The incident showed that traditional ceremonies and modern security could work together effectively. Mitchell eventually became an instructor at the Royal Guard Training Academy, where he could pass on his experience and knowledge to the next generation of protectors. His teaching emphasized not just physical techniques, but the mental preparation and professional attitude necessary for the role. Students learned from someone who had proven himself under the ultimate test. Years later, the morning at Buckingham Palace was remembered as a perfect example of how proper training, quick reflexes, and dedication to duty could turn a potential tragedy into a triumph. Mitchell's name became synonymous with the highest ideals of service and protection. His actions that day created a legacy that would inspire royal guards for generations to come, proving that even in modern times, there were still individuals willing to risk everything to protect others and maintain the traditions they served.